Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel, MD, General Physician. All my video lectures are mainly for educative purpose. In continuity with the previous videos, today we are going to talk about another emergency. What you can come across in your everyday practice is hematemesis. This will be very useful to fourth year students, even for third year students also, for their theory exams as well as for your oral exams, and once in a while you will face this particular problem in your everyday practice. Meaning is very simple. Hematemesis means vomiting of blood. Hema means blood, emesis means vomiting of blood. So we'll be discussing on that topic as routine, definition, etiology, pathophysiology, clinical features, investigations, differential diagnosis, treatment and complications. So hematemesis is vomiting of blood, or also you can say presence of blood in vomitus. Now this blood may be bright red in color or coffee brown in color or dark brown in color. When there is an active bleeding, particularly from upper GI tract, that is from esophagus, it will be more bright red in color, while the blood which enters the stomach, which is acted upon by the acid, that is hydrochloric acid, it is converted into coffee brown or a dark brown in color. By and large, the hematemesis will be there because of bleeding from the GI tract, that is upper GI tract, up to ligament of Treace, that is from esophagus, stomach and duodenum. And also because of hepatic pathophysiology or because of a bleeding disorders. You can have a bleeding from upper GI tract resulting into hematemesis. So upper GI bleeding is defined as a bleeding from the source proximal to ligament of Treace. So it is vomiting of a blood or a coffee ground color material, which is because of action of hydrochloric acid on a blood. There is another term which we commonly use, hematochezia, means presence of blood in stool or passage of visible bright red or maroon colored blood in stool. There is one another word utilized very commonly is BRBPR, bright red blood per rectum. Bright red blood per rectum. Melena is a black tarry false smelling stool that is consequence of digested blood in stool. And occult bleeding means bleeding without symptoms and patient cannot recognize it. Means patient cannot identify the presence of blood in stool. That we call as occult bleeding, which you will be able to identify by doing a test for occult blood. So hematemesis is a vomiting of a fresh blood or a old blood because of the involvement of proximal to ligament of Treace. Bright red is usually from upper GI tract and coffee ground color is because of a oozing of blood which is acted upon by the acid in stomach and converted into coffee ground color material. We call as acid hematine. Melena is a passage of a black false smelling stool. Mainly the bleeding which is from the upper GI tract is digested and it is converted into an iron compounds. Those gives black color to the stool and they are false smelling. Hematochezia, as routine we have mentioned, that passage of a bright red color blood in per rectum. occult bleeding, we already mentioned. Now, etiology wise, if you go through, almost the highest incidence is because of a peptic ulcer, which may be gastric ulcer or duodenal ulcer. Second big cause is esophageal varices. So we always divide into two groups: variceal bleeding, non-variceal bleeding. And in a non-variceal bleeding, the most common which comes is a acid peptic disorder, or we call peptic ulcer disorder. Then relatively less common, like Mallory-Weiss tear, gastroduodenal erosions, erosive esophagitis, neoplasm, vascular ectasia, and idiopathic, where you cannot identify still the source of bleeding. Here you can see this is a big ulcer, so this will be falling into these groups. This is an active bleeding of the erosion of the blood vessel. This is Mallory-Weiss tear, and these are esophageal varices. So these are some of the common ulcer, varices, Mallory-Weiss tear, and erosion producing erosive gastritis and damage to the blood vessel, and person can have an active bleeding. And if you look at the most common duodenal ulcer, erosion, gastric ulcer, so this will be accounting for almost, you can see, 45%. Varices is only 10%. Here also you see duodenal and gastric ulcer is the highest incidence. So those comes topmost of the list. Then esophagitis, you can have unknown etiology, gastric erosions, Mallory-Weiss, etc. Malignancy is a very small group. So esophagitis, NSAID, and H. pylori giving rise to peptic ulcer, vascular malformation, aortoduodenal fistula, absolutely rare. In liver disease, esophageal varices around 10%. The most common being peptic ulcer, that is we call as almost as high as 50%. And then you can have a erosion because of alcohol, steroids, NSAID, aspirin, etc. We call drug-induced gastric erosion or gastritis. Then malignancy is accounting for a very small percentage, 2%. Mallory-Weiss tear is 5%. And you will come across, we call stress ulcers. We'll be talking about that. So among esophagus, esophagitis, Mallory-Weiss syndrome, esophageal varices, and malignancy. Also, you can have reflux esophagitis, infective esophagitis, chemical esophagitis, and eosinophilic esophagitis, also resulting into upper GI bleeding. As far as stomach is concerned, peptic ulcer disease, gastritis, even secondary to portal hypertension, you can have involvement of the stomach mucosa, we call portal hypertensive gastropathy, gastric carcinoma, vascular lesions like gastric varices, duodenal lesions, gastric antral vascular ectasia, or it is also called as a watermelon stomach. These are all vascular lesions which can have active bleeding and can be a massive bleeding. As far as duodenum is concerned, we call duodenal ulcer or we call peptic ulcer disease, duodenitis, and you can have a arteriovenous malformation, also described as a angiodysplasia. These three structure will produce upper GI bleeding leading to hematemesis. At the same time, the gastric varices, that is esophageal varices and gastric varices, are very, very common due to cirrhosis, and cirrhosis leading to portal hypertension. And also because of portal hypertension, you get portal hypertensive gastropathy. So this will be the common mechanism. So most common is variceal bleeding, which is accounting for 10% of the cases. but the major group is peptic ulcer disease and we call as esophageal disease. So do look for those conditions. So esophageal condition, esophageal varieties, esophagitis, malignancy, ulcer, Mallory-Weiss tear, Bohrev syndrome, and Bohrev will invariably lead to mediastinitis. While in stomach, gastric ulcer, malignancy, gastritis, most common is drug-induced smoking, alcohol, etc. And among drug, NSAID, aspirin, steroids. Diulephoid lesions, that is abnormal vascular gastric enteral vascular ectasia, or also described as a watermelon stomach, portal hypertensive gastropathy, among duodenum, duodenal ulcer, AV malformations, hematobilia, then pancreatitis, and occasionally severe superior mesenteric artery syndromes, not very common. Mallory-Weiss tear is very frequently after having a good bout of alcohol, and then there is a severe vomiting and coughing that will produce a tear, and that is described as a Mallory-Weiss tear, and usually it is in the esophagus, lower end of esophagus, close to lower end of esophagus. So that can produce active bleeding and can be massive bleeding. 5 to 10% of upper GI bleeding is because of Mallory-Weiss syndromes. Yes, in 80 to 90% it can stop spontaneously, but may have active bleeding and may require local treatment, what we call is the endoscopic treatment like bending or injections. There is one very important group we call as a stress gastritis or stress ulcers, and this particular can happen very frequently along with respiratory failure, coagulopathy, drug induced like NSAID, steroids and aspirin, along with sepsis, a person who develops a hemodynamic instability, particularly severe shock stage, or we also label septic shock. When you get along with a head injury, it is described as a Cushing ulcer. And when it is with a burn, thermal injury, it is called curling ulcer. Also, it can be along with multiple traumatic injury. So these are all the conditions which can give rise to stress gastritis or stress ulcer. And this is because of decreased blood flow. There is a vasoconstriction and altered gastric luminal acidity. So that is the most common cause of stress gastritis, or we call stress ulcer. So Cushing ulcer is because of head injury, while curling ulcer is because of thermal injury. And those particular ulcers are more common in esophagus, stomach and small bowel, also may be seen in colon, while Cushing ulcer are commonly seen in duodenum and stomach. Miscellaneous groups like hemophilia, we call bleeding disorders, and among acquired groups, drug-induced idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, and particularly drugs like antiplatelet drugs, anticoagulants, thrombolytic drugs, NSAID, etc. And if a person develops pancytopenia along with thrombocytopenia, can also have bleeding. Smoking, alcohol and excessive tea, coffee also can further aggravate this particular. Don't forget hysterical individual, or we call psychogenic or malingering. Side effect of medicine, most commonly NSAID, steroid and aspirin. Cardiorespiratory, trauma, burns, post-operative, you can have upper GI tract stress ulcers. And also we have mentioned large quantity of alcohol, smoking, as well as stress. Varicose bleeds are usually around 10 to 15%, while non-varicose bleed in that peptic ulcer may be up to 50% of the group. And in esophagus, another 13 to 15% are esophagitis, which can be chemical, can be drug induced, can be stress induced, and idiopathic around 10% of the group. Malignancy is not common. Malarious tear is also not so common. And abnormal blood vessels 2%. Portal hypertensive gastropathy is very frequently along with cirrhosis leading to portal hypertension, and that is described as a snake skin appearance of inner lining of esophagus, and it can have acute or a chronic bleeding, and very frequently it is associated with what we call as portal hypertension, and that's why it is also labeled as a portal hypertensive gastropathy. So along with esophagus, you got involvement of the stomach, mainly fundus part of the stomach, and it is appearing like mosaic like pattern and also described as a snake skin appearance. It looks like a snake skin, so that is described as mosaic like pattern or snake skin pattern. And on etiology, portal hypertensive gastropathy. Again, you can see this. This is stomach, mosaic like pattern or a snake skin appearance. And you will have a little amount of bleeding spots. And larger spots will look like cherry red spots because of congestion. And further, you can have a black brown spots also, and that can be identified by upper GI endoscopy. You can also have a prolapse gastropathy, particularly in case of a hiatus hernia. You can have a prolapse gastropathy. Endoscopic erosive gastritis can be easily identified while doing a endoscopy, and you can have a erosive gastritis secondary due to drugs, alcohol, smoking, stress, etc. This is showing you acute gastritis and bleeding due to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And here you can see small ulcers, and they can also bleed. This is Barrett esophagus, which is an end result of GERD. So due to chronic GERD, you can end up with a mucosal changes into precancerous condition. It is described as a Barrett esophagus. You can have fungal infection called as esophageal candidiasis, and that can also produce bleeding and can end up with hematemesis. Herpes simplex can also involve the lower end of the esophagus, and those particular lesion looks like a volcano. So it is described as a small volcano like ulcer, very classical in case of a herpes simplex. Cytomegalovirus can also produce this a solitary deep well circumscribed ulcer seen at a gastroesophageal junction, and cytomegalovirus is responsible for those type of lesions. This is malignancy, lower end of esophagus. Then there is one lesion described as a Cameron lesion. Cameron lesions are the linear erosions or ulceration in the proximal stomach at the end of the large hiatal hernia, and this is secondary due to hiatus hernia, and it will result into a linear erosions, and that is described as a Cameron lesions, and slow oozing will be there, may also sometime end up with active bleeding. At the what we call as a anastomosis, you can have an anastomotic ulcer, so that can also produce hematemesis. And if you get a blood coming from the common bile duct, it is also called as a hemobilia, and that blood clot protruding from the ampulla can be seen here, and that is described as a hemobilia. So blood coming from biliary tree, that is from common bile duct. Watermelon stomach or a Gave syndrome. You can see this congested part. It looks like a watermelon, so described as a watermelon stomach. And this is due to abnormal blood vessels which are seen in a stomach mucosa. This is watermelon stomach, and this is abnormal blood vessels in stomach mucosa, and they can bleed. You can have an active bleeding, and this is described as a Diulofo lesion. As far as pathophysiology is concerned, main two: one, because of acid peptic disease, overproduction of acid, destruction of mucosa, along with destruction of mucosa, damage to the blood vessels and bleeding. Drug induced will also drug induce H. pylori, all those will damage the mucosa and can damage the blood vessels because of acid peptic digestion, and that will end up with bleeding. In portal hypertension, there is increase in the portal venous pressure resulting into esophageal varices, gastric varices, hypertensive gastropathy, or we call portal hypertensive gastropathy, and because of increased pressure in the venous system, it can bleed. In case of a coagulopathy, because of the disturbances in coagulation, person can bleed. And among vascular lesion, because of abnormal blood vessel, and when those blood vessels gets damaged, either because of congenital heavy malformation, hemangiomas, etc., those vessels, when they are damaged because of the acid peptic digestion or because of drug induced, etc., person can bleed. So these are the different mechanisms. So most common is acid peptic digestion. We are not going into detail. There are two things: because of increased acid production and H. pylori. These are the two main mechanisms which are producing mucosal damage and decrease mucus production. Mainly we divide into two big groups: variceal bleeding and non-variceal bleeding. Among non-variceal bleeding, it is acid peptic ulcer or peptic ulcer disease comes topmost on the list. Sorry. Most common presentation, almost in more than 50% of the people, is in the form of hematemesis. Good number of this person with upper GI bleed may present as melena, because whatever blood passes out through duodenum into small intestine will be digested, will be acted upon by GI tract enzymes, etc., and will be digested, and it will be converted into iron compounds which will give black color to the stool and false smelling. So melena will be seen in 70 to 80% of the people who has got upper GI bleeding. Hematochezia, unless a person has got a very active bleeding and there is an intestinal hurry, may present as hematochezia. Absolutely not common. Depending upon the severity of the bleeding, if there is a massive blood loss, person can present as hypotension, hemorrhagic shock, and can also present as syncope, pre-syncope. If there is a esophageal pathophysiology, good number of time they will present as dysphagia, dyspepsia. Lower end of esophagus and stomach will invariably present as epigastric pain. Esophageal involvement will very commonly present as a retrosternal pain, burning pain, and good number of time they can also present as a diffuse abdominal pain. Particularly in case of a malignancy, in case of cirrhosis, weight loss, and jaundice, quite common. So commonest presentation is melena, hematochezia, occult bleeding because of massive blood loss or a chronic blood loss, anemia. Along with that, light headache because of anemia, syncopal episodes, angina, even dyspnea. And the main presentation is hematemesis. So hematemesis will be there. You will have to always differentiate from hemoptysis and local bleeding from pharynx, nasal passage, that is epistaxis, and also bleeding from gums. You must differentiate that. Melena is another presentation. We already explained that whatever blood which is passing out through the duodenum into small intestine will be digested. First, it will be acted upon by acid converted into acid hematine, and then it will be acted upon by the enzymes, etc., and it will be converted into hematine, and there will be oxidation of heme, and then acted upon by the bacterial enzymes, and that will give black color to the stool. We already explained hematochezia, occult GI bleeding, and symptom because of the chronic blood loss or a massive blood loss at one time, which will give rise to hypotension, shock, and may even person can have syncopal episodes. But because of a chronic blood loss, iron deficiency anemia, and secondary to anemia, weakness, light headache, fatigue, dyspnea, anginal pain, etc. Always you will have to differentiate between hematemesis and hemoptysis. It is commonly described if a person says that I require a bucket, it is more in favor of hematemesis. I require a small ball, it is more in favor of hemoptysis. We'll be having a difference. This is very frequently asked as a short note. So do pay attention. So hemoptysis is along with cough. It may be bright red in color, and in some cases it may be frothy blood-stained sputum. And this frothy is quite common in an acute left ventricular failure. While in hematemesis, it is either fresh bright red in an active bleeding or coffee brown color, but it is never frothy. Hemoptysis is always associated with cough, dyspnea, respiratory symptoms, and when it gets stuck into tracheobronchial tree, person can also have asphyxia. While hematemesis is always along with nausea, vomiting, pain in abdomen, and maybe a finding of portal hypertension like ascites, caput medusa, etc. Hemoptysis is by and large always bright red in color, very rarely black color, usually old blood, while hematemesis is bright red in color in active bleeding, particularly in upper GI tract, and coffee brown color when it is acted upon by the acid and converted into acid hematine. If you look for the pH, the material will be alkaline, while in case of hematemesis, it will be acidic because of presence of hydrochloric acid. History of cough is present here, history of stomach, upper GI tract, liver disorders like cirrhosis, or maybe drug ingestion like NSAID, aspirin, steroids, or history of bleeding disorders, maybe congenital or acquired. Sometimes you can have a blood tint sputum along with hemoptysis, while here melena is more common, and very rarely you can have hematochezia. Already we have mentioned that hemoptysis is mixed with sputum, this is mixed with food. Anemia depending upon the severity, while in case of hematemesis, particularly because of a massive blood loss or because of a chronic blood loss, anemia is more common. Usually in hemoptysis you will see a macrophages with hemosiderin pigments, while here they are very rarely present. Hemoptysis is usually spurting in nature and very frequently associated with chest pain, cough, dyspnea, cyanosis, etc. While there is no spurting, and very frequently person will be presenting because peptic ulcer disease is the most common cause of hematemesis, so they present to you with a pain in epigastric region or retrosternal region. And second common cause is cirrhosis of liver, so they will present to you with a portal hypertension signs like ascites, caput medusa, gynecomastia, pulmonary erythema, spider nevi, jaundice, all those signs. So we already discussed all these things. You can go through your leisure time. This is another small difference. Hemoptysis is because of pulmonary and cardiac, while this is because of GI tract. Cough, chest pain, dyspnea is more common symptom in hemoptysis, while nausea, vomiting, pain in abdomen is common symptom. Cough is more common along with hemoptysis, while vomiting. So person vomits out, here it is coughed out. This is bright red in color, this will be dark red or coffee brown in color. This will be along with sputum or blood stained frothy sputum, while this will be along with food material or gastric content. This will be alkaline, this will be acidic. This will be very frequently hemoptysis will be occasionally may be present with black tarry stool because of swallowed sputum which was containing blood, while this is almost always present with melena. Sputum with blood streaks may be present after hemoptysis, while here in hematemesis usually you will not have any sputum. So these are all the differences you can go through. So whenever you approach to a person with hematemesis, always a good history, good examination, history of drug ingestion like aspirin, steroid and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, past history of acid peptic disorders, dyspepsia, pain in abdomen, alcohol, drugs should be taken properly. Some of the family history, particularly for congenital bleeding disorders, you try to elicit that history in family. And whenever you ask regarding a hematemesis, confirm that it is hematemesis. Is it with cough? It is with vomiting. Then second question is regarding the quantity of a blood loss, in that whether it is small, massive or it is in a micro, very difficult to identify. Color, bright red will be more in favor of hemoptysis, or it can be also seen sometime in an active bleeding from upper GI, that is from esophagus, particularly in case of a variceal bleeding or because of Mallory Weiss. Coffee brown color is almost most common in case of a bleeding from gastric ulcer, duodenal ulcer, and also maybe also in case of esophageal varices and gastric varices. Always ask in relation to vomiting, presence of food or not, related to food, retrosternal burning pain, chronic history of acid peptic disorder, dyspepsia, etc. Fever will be more common with respiratory groups. Pain in epigastrium is more common with acid peptic disorders. Retrosternal pain again more common with GERD and esophageal disorders. Jaundice, ascites, caput medusa, piles, splenomegaly more common with portal hypertension leading to esophageal varices, gastric varices, and portal hypertensive gastropathy. That will be the cause for hematemesis. Loss of appetite, loss of weight more common with malignancy. Melena hematochezia is more common after hematemesis, quite common, and hematochezia along with upper GI bleeding is not so common unless there is a intestinal hurry and there is a massive bleeding. Also ask a history of dysphagia, which is more common with lower end disorders like Barrett esophagus, esophageal carcinoma, achalasia cardia, hiatus hernia, etc. And if a person is having a massive blood loss with symptom signs of hypotension and shock state syncopal episodes, it suggests hemorrhagic shock or severe bleeding. Asking a few questions will give you an answer. If you want to go through just at your leisure time, this is the history what is being given and these are the diagnosis or these are the possibilities what you can come across. Say simple example, multiple emesis before hematemesis, history of having a large bout of alcohol and retching sensation, always suspect malarial stare. Say person has got dysphagia, odinophagia and symptom signs of GERD, esophageal ulcers, epigastric pain, history of consuming NSAID for a longer period, aspirin, peptic ulcer. Patient in ICU having GI bleeding, after admission, respiratory failure, multi-organ failure, person is on aspirin, etc. Do keep it in mind, stress-induced gastritis. These are some of the way you elicit the history and you can suspect what it is. Past history is important because past history of head injury, previous history of GI bleed, any instrumentation which is being done, liver disease, renal disease, cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory condition, history of abdominal surgery, all helps to find out the etiology. Drug history like salicylates, NSAID, steroids, anticoagulants should be taken. Oral iron will interfere with melena and may give a false interpretation. And also it will interfere with your occult blood test. Even bismuth will also interfere with melena, may mimic like melena. Personal history of alcohol, smoking, tobacco abuse, cocaine, particularly even a person consuming these drugs, chronic use of drugs, you should ask that. Weight loss, nausea, vomiting, anorexia, that will be more in favor of malignancy. All this I can skip over. At your leisure time, you can go through past history, certain findings. If a person has got pigmented lip, goes in favor of Peutz-Jeghers syndrome, multiple neurofibromatosis. If he has got a purpuric lesion, henoxylin purpura, splenomegaly, ascites, caput medusa goes more in favor of portal venous thrombosis, portal hypertension. Telangiectasia, if they are seen, it can be Osler-Weber-Rendu disease, which can give rise to again hematemesis. These are all signs of liver disorders like icterus, clubbing, edema, jaundice, more in favor of liver disorders. While pallor may be secondary due to chronic blood loss. And if there is a massive blood loss at one single episode, may come to you with a hemorrhagic shock. Lymphadenopathy, particularly Virchow's lymph node, also called as a Troisius sign, more in favor of a malignancy, secondary metastasis. tachycardia, hypotension, tachypnea more in favor of massive blood loss. Spider nevi more in favor of portal hypertension, cirrhosis of liver. If you get vein dilated around the umbilicus and direction of a blood flow away from umbilicus, caput medusa, that will be more in favor of portal venous hypertension. While if you get a vertical dilated veins, it may be inferior vena cava obstruction. So this will be more in favor of inferior vena cava obstruction. You can see a vertical dilated veins, this type. And blood flow will be from obstructed to non-obstructed, so from below upward, while this will be away from umbilicus. Gynecomastia, ascites, umbilical hernia, dilated veins over the abdomen more in favor of portal hypertension. Sorry, this is caput medusa, not umbilical hernia. Ascites, caput medusa, dilated veins over the abdomen, gynecomastia, straightforward in favor of portal hypertension. Pulmonary erythema is also more in favor of portal hypertension. White nails again more in favor of cirrhosis of liver. You get ecchymosis around the venipuncture or even with a minimal trauma, we call bruising, more in favor of a clotting disorders. And if you get such appearance, what we call as ecchymosis or hematoma at the site of intramuscular injection, again more in favor of a clotting disorders. Acanthosis nigricans will be more in favor of what we call as malignant disorders, particularly gastric carcinoma, bronchogenic carcinoma, bronchial carcinoma. If you get telangiectasia over the tongue, lips and face, hereditary telangiectasia or Rendu-Osler-Weber's disorders, and that may be associated with abnormal vascular malformation in GI tract, and that can give rise to vascular malformation in a stomach. Peutz-Jeghers syndrome will have a pigmentation over the lips, and that may be associated with abnormal vascular malformation in GI tract as well as stomach. Von Recklinghausen disease will be with multiple neurofibromatosis. Café-Oller spot again may be associated with liver disorders. Henoch-Schönlein purpura is associated with bleeding tendencies. Portal hypertension, caput medusa, this is again showing a caput medusa, pulmonary erythema, spider nevi, and jaundice, early jaundice. Ascites, spider nevi, pulmonary erythema, Dupuytren contractures, again suggest chronic liver disease, cirrhosis of liver. Leukonychia, gynecomastia, more common for cirrhosis of liver, portal hypertension. If there is a scar seen and if there is a previous history of surgery done on a stomach or esophagus, always rule out acid peptic disorders. If you get small lesions, those are called petechia, little bigger, purpura, and bigger than that, this we have already shown you here. These are called ecchymosis, and deep they will be hematomas. As far as investigation is concerned, history is the most essential. Good physical examination, particularly for abdominal examinations, and then depending upon what you are suspecting, upper GI endoscopy, barium meal, barium swallow, barium follow through now rarely required because of a good endoscopy, almost it has replaced barium studies. Blood parameters like LFT, prothrombin, INR, CBC, mainly to rule out a liver pathophysiology, and CBC is to rule out thrombocytopenia and bleeding disorders. Abdominal ultrasound is another group of investigation which can help you to identify liver disorders, portal hypertensions, etc. Gastric juice analysis will be there to identify acid peptic disorders. Then test for H. pylori again will be for acid peptic disorders. And on an upper GI endoscopy, if you come across any deep ulcer or there is a growth, you can go for biopsy to rule out malignancy. And if there is a history of intake of anticoagulants or person is on aspirin, NSAID, steroids, or person is already having say thrombocytopenia, you must go for all study for test for hemostasis to find out what type of disorder it is. So CBC, hemoglobin to find out the severity of the disorders, platelet count to find out thrombocytopenia, coagulative profiles, quite important, liver function test, electrolytes, renal parameters, blood grouping cross matching because a person may require blood transfusion like PEC cell. ECG may be required if you are suspecting a cardiovascular disorders. Stool local blood may be required in a person who is having a chronic oozing. Infective pathophysiology to rule out HIV, hepatitis B surface antigen, hepatitis C parameters, etc. to find out the pathophysiology or etiology of cirrhosis of liver. So blood investigation, endoscopic and radio imagination. Barium meal is almost replaced by upper GI endoscopy. And occasionally, if you can't identify the site, you may go for even radionucleotide study by RBC which are tagged with radioisotope, and you can do that tagged RBC scan and try to identify the site of bleeding. So these are all the blood parameters which you go for, and these are radio imaging studies. Upper GI endoscopy is the only requirement as far as hematemesis is concerned, but also to rule out other condition which can produce melena and hematochezia. You may require colonoscopy or small bowel endoscopy, or we call capsule endoscopy. Very rarely barium studies are required. Radionucleotide we have already mentioned. RBC tagged with a radioisotope, you can do the scan for that. Occasionally, to person who is having a persistent bleeding, you might require angiography and then endoscopic ligation or bending. And very rarely you may require a CT scan to find out the etiology. Abdominal ultrasound is very useful to find out the liver pathology, portal hypertension, etc. So this is upper GI endoscopy. You can see here there is a bleeding from lower end of the esophagus secondary to Mallory-Weiss tear. So this is a Mallory-Weiss tear which can be identified by upper GI endoscopy. This is esophageal varices, early esophageal varices. Here you can see there is a little more thicker. So these are medium size or grade 2, and these are big, large size esophageal varices. So it occupies more than 1/3 of the esophageal lumen. This is occupying less than 1/3, and this is just elevated surface, So this is early, this is medium size, these are large size, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and these are most likely to bleed massively. You can have a video capsule endoscopy mainly for small bowel and large bowel bleeding sites. You must always differentiate the etiology like esophageal varices, peptic ulcer, Mallory-Weiss, Bohrev, bleeding disorders, or it is drug induced or a stress ulcer. But mainly we try to differentiate varicose from non-varicose bleeding. By and large, we don't require a difference between upper GI bleed and lower GI bleed. But still, in lower GI bleed, we have already mentioned regarding upper GI bleed. In lower GI bleed, we'll be always looking for hematochezia. Can be with melena if the source is from small intestine or ascending colon. Strong supportive features, the blood clots are mixed with stool, and by and large they are hemodynamically stable. Very rarely they get a massive bleeding and they are hemodynamically unstable. So always look for those features. Depending upon that, you can. While here in upper GI bleed, hematochezia is not a common finding, and very frequently when you go for a gastric lavage, you will detect RBC in that gastric lavage, and if you do a blood urea to creatinine ratio, it will be high. And you can find out the risk factors like alcohol, NSAID, H. pylori, hiatus hernia, cirrhosis of liver, etc. Management will depend upon the etiology and severity. So first always look whether the patient is stable or unstable. If patient is unstable, always stabilize the patient. Protect the airway so that he doesn't get asphyxia. Restore the circulation by giving IV fluids, or even if person requires a blood transfusion. As early as possible, identify the source of bleeding and try to erase the bleeding. And then depending upon the etiology, specific treatment. So initial resuscitation is protect the airway. IV line should be started. If person is having massive bleeding, look for HB, PCV, and also have PT and INR to rule out liver pathophysiology. And if hemoglobin is markedly reduced, you might have to give Paxil to make person hemodynamically stable. So airway circulation should be absolutely necessary. So history, physical examination, and then investigations to find out the etiology should be done. Majority of the thing we already mentioned regarding history, examination, and laboratory parameters. We already mentioned. At your leisure time, you can go through. So treatment we divide into first stabilization, followed by medical treatment, endoscopic treatment, or surgical treatment. If medical treatment is feasible and it controls the bleeding, that is the first choice. If bleeding still persists, or if there is a massive bleeding, or there is an active bleeding, endoscopic treatment is first preferred. And if endoscopic treatment does not give you good answer, then surgical treatment is advisable. Among what we call as a medical treatment, drugs, along with that you can go for what we call as a, particularly in varicose bleeding, balloon tamponade by using Sengstaken Blackmore tubes. This is that tube. So you can inflate the gastric balloon and you can inflate the esophageal balloon, and you can apply a tamponade for a period, and then you can resuscitate and then go for a endoscopic variceal treatment. Sclerotherapy is endoscopial. If with this also it is not controlled, then you can go for esophageal transection, portocaval shunt, tips, etc. Those are surgical intervention. These are all surgical intervention. This is esophageal intervention. These are some of the flow charts. You have to find out hemodynamically stable, then you can depend upon the patient condition. You can start an IV fluids, stabilize upper GI hemorrhage by either endoscopy, and then you can start with pharmacotherapy like IV proton pump inhibitor, or then switch over to oral, etc. If there is a varicose bleeding, then you can go for band ligation, sclerotherapy, those particular group of treatment, and you can utilize even octreotide, that is vasopressin group of drugs, for temporarily. It can reduce the varicose bleeding, and if it is a non-varicose bleeding, you can go for different modes of treatment. And if a person is unstable, then person has to be admitted in ICU, and IV drips should be started. He might require a blood products like Paxil, and in case of a thrombocytopenia, even platelet transfusion. And then if it is a varicose bleeding, you can go for band ligation, sclerotherapy, and then if not controlled, surgical intervention. So depending upon what it is, accordingly you can go for. So suspected upper GI bleeding, if hemodynamically stable or unstable. If it is stable, then go for. Is it stable hemodynamically? If answer is no, resuscitate and perform the emergency. Then you can perform upper GI esophageal gastroduodenoscopy as soon as the person is hemodynamically stable. Depending upon the stability, say if person is unstable, so first stabilize the person and then you can go for endoscopy. Identify the source. If you can identify the source, specific treatment is given. If you can't identify the source, then also you might require a colonoscopy to find out is there any associated cause for hematochezia or melena. And good number of times there are some obscure GI bleeding causes. You should try to identify that causes by these different investigations like CT angio, then tagged RBC scan, capsule endoscopy, etc. So try to identify those causes. So general medical management, and if there is a variceal bleeding, you can go for medical treatment. You can go for Sengstaken tube, endoscopic therapy, and later on surgical intervention. And among those upper GI bleeding, locally you can utilize adrenaline, fibrin glue, sclerosing agents, etc. And you can use a thermotherapy or mechanical therapy like clips, bending, staples, sutures, etc. So these are all those things which are being done. We have already discussed the highlights of all those things. At your leisure time, you can go through all this different. This is when person has got recurrent variceal bleeding, what you should do. Usually, this is all if a person is a severe portal hypertension, and then you can go for TIPS or liver transplant. That will be the last alternative when a person gets repeated. This is depending upon the shock stage, how you identify class 1, class 2, class 3 and class 4. Depending upon these are clinical findings. At your leisure time you can go through. This is fluid resuscitation, blood replacement, or you might require even a platelet if there is a thrombocytopenia. And you can utilize desmopressin or we call octreotide to at least arrest temporarily active bleed from esophageal varices. Nasogastric lavage is very important to find out the site of bleeding. So first give a nasogastric lavage so you clean up the area and then you can look for the site of bleeding. This is again endoscopic treatment what can be given depending upon the etiology. At your leisure time you can easily go through. This is treatment for peptic ulcer bleeding. So endoscopic treatment, you can go for medical treatment. Here there is an endoscopic treatment, medical treatment, depending upon what it is, whether there is an active bleeding or no active bleeding. If there is an active bleeding, you might require an operative treatment or early elective operation. And if there is a grade 2B type of bleeding, then medical treatment may be enough. But if there is no active bleeding, depending upon 2A, 2B and 3 variety, according to the Forest classification, in 3, medical treatment is only necessary, while here you might require an additional treatment. This is endoscopic sclerotherapy, particularly very beneficial in a person with esophageal varices. So you inject a sclerosing agent and arrest the bleeding. So this is also called as endoscopic variceal ligation by using a bending. So that is another very useful tool. This is bending which is being done. You can see this is bending of a esophageal varices which were bleeding. and you can stop bleeding by doing a bending ligation. Then there is endoscopic sclerotherapy. Short form it is called EST. So that is by using a sclerosing agents. And if that does not works out well, and there is a recurrent episodes, then you can go for what is called as a TIPS. That is trans internal jugular portocaval shunt. So portal vein is connected to inferior vena cava drainage area, that is we call it caval. So this hepatic vein will be drained into IVC. So you connect the portal vein via a stent. So that is called TIPS. So this is portocaval shunt you create, and that is by using a stent, and this is done by a passing on a catheter. This is during active bleeding because of a variceal bleeding. This is portal hypertensive gastropathy, what you suggest. At your leisure time, you can go through all those. There are many. Chronic bleeding, what you do. And this is particularly in a case of a gastric vascular antral ectasia. Short form we call is a GAVE. And on endoscopy, you will have a watermelon appearance of stomach. It is a vascular antral ectasia. The commonest complication because of a massive hematemesis is a shock stage. We call it as a hemorrhagic shock. In case of a portal hypertension, person can go into hepatocellular failure, we call it as a hepatic coma. Because of a chronic blood loss, anemia, and depending upon the basic etiology, person can have a complication secondary due to basic etiology like portal hypertension, acid peptic disorder, perforation can occur, or because of say malignancy, secondary metastasis, etc. So in nutshell, hematemesis, very useful, quite frequently you will come across in your everyday practice. If you like this particular lecture, please press button like, please subscribe, and if you feel that it is useful to your friends also, you can share with your friends. I think this will be very helpful to you in your theory as well as oral exams, and almost definitely it will be useful when you go for your private practice. If you pick up those cases, you can save the life. So at the end of this lecture, I thank you all for taking out time. I know that your time is valuable, and I appreciate the time you have spent with me. See you in next lecture.